Hello, land of two rivers. Where did you come from? Hi, Helgoland. Seems like you are his latest, passion area. Few years back, maybe almost 4 or 5 years back, it was all about Bengal. Now he has kind of forgotten us. Well, the quantum world was also his, passion area a couple of years back. And now we just sit in the self and we just wait for him to pick us up, but he doesn't. I have this habit of collecting books by themes, and in my life I always move from one theme to another. And right now, like many of you know, I'm very passionate about sustainability, and I've been reading avidly about climate science, climate change, and so books are always a part of my learning, right? Like many of you, I don't love to just look at online resources. So this is my climate collection. I started off with some basic primers like the Carbon Almanac, right? I don't know whether you guys have seen it, but for those of you who are getting started, this is a great book to be in. Then there is this climate book by Greta Thunberg. After I started studying about the science, I realized that it's very important to get different perspectives. So it's not just I'm pro climate activism or anti, but I love reading on all sides of the story. So there will be people like Unsettled, which will talk about that these claims that you are making on climate science are still not settled, and they go into how you can interpret data, and and there are different ways to cut data. There will be also people who will talk about, for example, there's a great book called This Climate Capitalism this is by Akshat Rathi, great book. And all of these things are, these books are fulfilling my life. There's a interesting one I picked up recently by, called The Oneness versus the 1% by Vandana Shiva. So this is a section which is keeping me engrossed. And of course, I wouldn't miss the classic, which inspired us all. Yvon Chouinard's Patagonia, Let My People Go Surfing. I'm not sure whether I pronounced his name right, but nevertheless, it's a great book for me to read. So, it's like this. It's like I start off with themes, and then I'll collect the books, and then one fine day I will just switch off from that subject, and then maybe start collecting different kinds of books. And I keep them, sorted all in different areas of the house. There's another passion area which is running in parallel. So there's a lot of consciousness and brain science related books here. Anil Seth, I'm sure a lot of you guys have read or heard about him. Consciousness studies. This is a great book. Galileo's Error. So these are all pretty new ones. In here. Rethinking Consciousness by Graziano. Very interesting. Just like for those of you who believe in free will, or we don't have free will, they would love reading about this. And of course, the classics of Sapolsky. Sapolsky wrote this book called Behave, and that whatever we are doing now has a reason, which is 5 seconds old, and 5 minutes old, and 5 hours old, and 5 days old, and 5 years and 5 million years old as well. He has written a new book called Determined. So I keep collecting all these books, right? And maybe right next to it, I will without any kind of a shame, I will keep my books which lean far right, and what happens to the Hindu temples, who broke them down. Just today, I got this book, Waiting for Shiva. It's a great book by Vikram Sampath. Right now, Kashi's Gyanvapi Mosque is in a lot of, people are debating about it, about a mosque which stood there. I studied in Kashi, and I have great feelings about this, the temple there. So I love reading about temples and our ancient India and stuff like that, and so I just love to keep collecting books and keep them all over the place. I think it's a same habit with many of you, right? David Chalmers has written this new book called Reality a couple of years back. He's the guy who talks about the hard problem of consciousness. So consciousness studies and climate are, kind of stuff that I'm dabbling through. I'll keep books in different places. Like, I went to Auroville and I started collecting books on Aurobindo. Aurobindo is a very hard, author to crack, right? But I've been trying at some times, and then I will give up. So I was so fascinated with Auroville that I picked up some books there. I started reading about his integral yoga. I also realized that, there are these books, like this one, Glimpses of the Mother's Life. This was there in my father's collection. And I never really knew that my father was such a great fan of Aurobindo. But when I started going through his collections, I found so many books on Aurobindo that it seemed very uncanny that I landed up in Auroville. And then when I came back and I was browsing my father's book collection, I started seeing more and more of these. So it's at times I just feel that, there's really nothing original, right? There is this message which is passed down, which is, handed down from generations, and whatever he was interested in, I'm also getting interested in. And so I've been buying books of Aurobindo, and now I'm finding that, as I'm rummaging through my old library, and when I take you there, you will see that, there are these books there. Of course, there is some books on, Ramani Maharshi, who I've been, again, following from ever since I was studying Vedanta. And sometimes, some places I have kept all my old books. These are books that I was there with me. Some of them were there in India, some when I was in the US. And I didn't bring back anything from the US. No electronics or, clothes and stuff like that. I just got back some of my old books. Now, these are books which I am sure they feel very sad because I rarely come and look at them. But there are these, little stories. Of course, there's Vikram Seth's Suitable Boy, which is now a serial, I think, on Netflix and others. But I remember this book, the Stroke Talbot's, Engaging India. This was right after India, did the explosion, that atomic bomb. And me and my friend, who is down no more, we were constantly debating that, was this a good thing or the wrong thing? And he was very, very clear that, I think India has done a great thing by going up against the nuclear powers. And that time, Stroke Talbot, Engaging India, and how India, used diplomacy and so diplomacy, democracy, and the bomb. It's a classic book on how, India engages stuff. I started reading about the Kabbalah at one stage, Arun Shourie writing on the world of fatwas. So a lot of these books, were collected during my stay in the US. I will, of course, walk you through some other parts where, of my library where I've got these old books. There's a section which is like this mix of stuff. So been reading, things on Noam Chomsky. This is a book that I read about, and this is very nice. It's called The Braiding Sweetgrass. I have not been able to finish it. I just read about the first few chapters, but a lot of interesting. It's a very nicely written book, on indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants. Talking about plants, I have a section on plants. But this is a place where I also have a lot of interest in medicine, and of course Siddhartha Mukherjee with his Gene and the Song of the Cell and the Emperor of All Maladies, all of them taken together. There's also a brilliant book on Vivekananda, which is Guru of the World by Ruth Harris. So yeah, this section has a lot of a mix of books. This one I want to show you for a different reason. This is like on Garuda Puran from Devdutt Patnaik and the Hindu rite of entry into heaven. I lost my mother a year back, and once I was done with the cremation and the Shraddh ceremony, I was very interested to know, why we do this Shraddh, for Hindus, right? What is this festival and this, what is not this festival, what is this ritual all about, right? And this book takes you into the depth of it, right? It tells you exactly why we do this on the 13th day, why we offer this, the rice mounds. And so if, for me, it's always been like that. If something is of area of interest, first I have to go out and get the books. I may not finish it, but I know that the book is there, right? And that's how it has been. And so what I do is, I don't have a way of organizing my books, but what I do is I just thematically organize them now. So when I'm, very interested in the Puranas, Then I would get the classics. Of course, Vivek Debra is a very favorite author of mine, and I've gone through his Bhagavad Puran, and I've started reading his Mahabharata. I just barely finished one. I couldn't finish the others, but I did collect all the Puranas and the Mahabharata, and also his 3-part Ramayana. So I had to get everything. Now I don't know when I'm going to finish it, but we are headed into Shivratri in the next few days. And I've been reading Shiv Puran, because as I'm doing my fasting and preparing for the festival, I felt that it would be good to read Shiv Puran. So that's all my Puranic stuff. I got very deep into spirituality. I think almost 4 or 5 years back, when I started understanding Vedanta, and that's when I started reading the Upanishads. So from there, of course, I had to quickly get into understanding everything. So, the Bhagavatam, getting to understand, the old classics like the Brahma Sutra, Bhashya. So all the Bhashyas of Sankaracharya, I had to put my hands on it. And then I also went into other areas where the Sankhya philosophy is the original, philosophy of India. I think, it's pre-Vedantic philosophy. And it's very, very interesting. I first picked up this whole understanding of the aphorisms. The Sankhya aphorisms. Aphorism, as you know, is a very deep word being expressed in very few, deep thought being expressed in very few words. So the Sankhya aphorisms of Kapila. Kapila is like this OG, I think, spiritual, guru of this world, the Rishi, whichever way you kind of look at it. So all my spirituality philosophy books are sitting right there, and right below that was my quantum phase. When I just went into quantum science, and I was so intrigued because I was finding parallels of my the quantum world with the kind of philosophy being expressed in Vedanta, and I felt there would be synergies. So I went in and I got all the different books. This is of of lot of interest to me, which is dark matter. The dark energy, the elephant in the universe, is all about that. Then of course I have my favorite author Carlo Rovelli, who wrote Helgoland, and just very recently I got this book called White Holes. You guys must read Carlo Rovelli if you are not, and if you're interested in quantum. He just takes science writing to a different level. But of course all the people here are very, very great guys, great writers. Sean Carroll, Jim Baggott, all of them do interesting stuff. So I have my quantum theme, and then there is this Vedanta theme. Right above that, literally like blasphemy. So I will have What is Islam and the House of Islam sitting right next to Hinduism and the Hindus. Now, a lot of people will look at Wendy Doniger and flip, saying, oh, this is not, and like, there's a very biased view. A lot of times her books were being banned. I don't want to get into anything controversial about it, but I like reading about both sides, right? These two books were favorites of my father, Roma Rolla, who wrote about Vivekananda and Ramakrishna. And I was so surprised when I walked into Pondicherry and I discovered, Rolla, his whole journey into Pondicherry and how he went about, studying, Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, and many other, aspects of spiritual, gurus in India, and writing about them. So sometimes I go Vedanta to Tantric world and read, the original book of Tantra Sara. So I'll have my, Tantra collection, and of course the Penguin classics of the Rig Veda, the Bits, and all of that. So this section is all about, it's all, I would say, the Hindu philosophy. So people don't understand. A lot of times they'll get confused between, the Puranas, which are more on the stories, and the Vedanta, which is more philosophy, right? Because Indian spirituality was not prescription about these rituals, which are laid out. Of course, Rig Veda was a lot about rituals, but that was before, the Puranic gods had come in. So all of that, is here. And then all these old books kind of go up there, right? So these books, are very difficult for me to get up and access every day. But there are, I always had this interest. So while all these books are new, I had gotten this Law Code of Manu, or, bought Vivek Debra's Bhagavad Gita long back, Rupert Sheldrake. So different kind of books here, and these up there are even older ones. I will have my dictionary, the Bengali dictionary from my childhood, this is an old book which when I was a little boy, I would get that book and I would hold on to this. And I think I've now managed to retrieve it and get it here. And let me see what this is. This is a classic. You're not going to get this book anymore. This is Rabindranath Tagore, 1861 to 1960. It's a centenary volume. It was published by Sahitya Academy. As you can see, the book was almost getting decimated. It was hidden somewhere in my father's old book library. He had passed away. No one was taking care of it. But it's a beautiful book which I managed to kind of recover, bound, and I brought it back, and it's sitting here. I think it's been ages since I touched the book, just to show you. So a lot of these books were collected in the US, and I brought them back here, including my marketing books, some story books, some fiction, non-fiction. It was not so much of a themed reading at those stages. On the right hand side there I would have some of those time life books. So I was always a history buff, and those books were all about reading history, which was sorted by every 100 years. So like 1800 to 1900 or 1600 to 1700, stuff like that. So a lot of these old books up there, which I don't get a chance to get in there and touch, but I remember those books. I think the interesting thing about these books are there is always this little story that you're reminded. So at some time I was very interested in reading about Nehru, and I would collect all his books, like his classics of discovery of India, which my father had introduced me to, or the letters that he used to write to Indira from the jail, which is now the Glimpses of World History. But now I also read about RSS, right? I also read about the man who saved India, right? Sardar Patel. Obviously these are two classics, Savarkar by Vikram Sampath, and one needs to go deep into these books to even understand what the person is. All through my life, I know there were these, misformed ideas, right? That, this is what RSS is, and, and they killed Gandhi, and that's all that we would know. But, now, when you go through how RSS is organized, who was Savarkar, what did he do, who was the real Netaji Bose, and all of them sitting next to them is also Akbar. So it's just like, I think, I believe that instead of staying in one bubble, you should just widen your views, and you should have the urge to read both sides of the story, to get both perspectives. And it's okay to take one side, but or it's quite possible that you will be taking different sides at different times of your life. But that's how my book reading has progressed. This entire section is on Bengali books, fictions that I've collected. To be honest, I'm not able to find time to read fiction now, but I've just kept it. And some days, I will just pick up a book, and, Vibhuti Bhushan, for example, has been one of my favorites, and I love reading. I used to cry when, as a child, I would read, Pather Pachali or Aparajita, and now I've got all his books. There's a lot of them which I've read, and there are a lot of them which I've just kept, for future. Half the time I'm always saying that, this is a book that I should read in future, but let me get it now. Because when I get older, I'm not going to be able to, buy these books. Now, that may be a completely wrong reason for buying the books now, but I end up doing. This one, for example, is a classic series on Ayurvedic, right? So, Chiranjeev Bonoshadi, I had first seen my father having just one part of this book. And as a child, I would flip through the book and be superbly interested. This is actually talks about Ayurveda, and every little vegetable, every little herb, every little thing is all documented in Bengali here by, so this is basically, what you do with it, right? How you can make a paste out of it, or how you can extract the juice, and what's the kind of disease it will help. It's a classic. Nobody knows of these books, but it's like such an interesting collection that you take a regular vegetable, or you take a regular herb, or you take a regular saag, and you kind of figure out what it's going to do for your health. So that's like my Bengali collection here. A lot of them are, these older books which are still lying there. I will have an Arnold Schwarzenegger, because at some time, I wanted to be doing my bodybuilding, and of course I had to get his book, right? And I've been carrying it around. I got this in the US, I think that was in the mid-90s. And now, I've never opened it, but, occasionally if I'm in a mood to do some, like get back in shape or get to the gym, I will pick up an Arnold Schwarzenegger and I'll get inspired. There is an interesting collection of books here, and I will bring you down to take a look at them. Let me see where it is. Yeah, so you can see here, I've got like, this is with Shimul. I would, be very interested in his, he kind of gave me this passion about trees, the secret life of trees, secret network of nature. And now I'm actually seeing them here, right? How trees talk to each other, how plants communicate with each other. So the secret, network of nature, then, the hidden life of trees here, again, then from bacteria to bark and back. So a lot of books around trees. And, this is also an area where I was also very passionate once about this whole business of how you do keto and how you, use grains and stuff like that. So all the body related stuff is right here. So that's about it. I think, this section of the books that I covered, pretty much a mix of different things. And then there are these little odd collections here. But that's how my book reading has always been. I must show you this side of the shelf, and there's some interesting ones here. There's a very interesting book that I must show you, and good memories of that book. Very good memories of the book. I'll try climbing up and getting it down for you, because there is a reason. So this book, look at the book, right? It's all torn and eaten up and dog-eared, right? It's Davidson's Principles and Practice of Medicine, a book that I got after a lot of begging from my very dear friend. His name is Joy Chakraborty. He was a doctor, he was a cardiologist. All his life, he had a very disciplined life, and just 4 to 5 years back, I think, yes, 5 years now, he just had a massive attack, massive infarction on a day of Christmas, and he is no more. But I had begged him to give me his medical books, and he parted with one because I was so interested in medicine and Davidson's Principles and Practice of Medicine. I had to get it and keep it. And now, of course, I got a brand new Davidson's Medicine, and I even got a Merck manual. I've got a DSM-5. I've got all kinds of these books. So I'm kind of like a quack doctor as well, I'm like a quack doctor, and I can treat people. So I will study these books. If somebody has a problem, I'll also do research online, but I'll go to the basics by using this medical books. Also science. So if I have to study, quantum, then I have to understand the maths. So I go to the, I'm forgetting his name. Yeah. It's Len Susskind and Art Friedman. I will show you this book here. Yeah, this book. So the theoretical minimum, this book, is where you start, and you kind of have to get your math right, before you can understand quantum. And being an engineering student, I definitely had an idea, but I wanted to know better, how to do, understand this mathematical stuff. So this book I've never touched. By the mathematical methods of physics, so to understand general relativity and all of that. So suddenly now I'm in this physics space and I want to read this. On another day, I will end up buying, law books, because I'm, in a village, and right now I need to know the law to encounter all these strange, interferences from the society. Like I will have somebody doing encroachment. I need to know how, I'm going to block his illegal encroachment. So I've got a whole set of, legal books. How you do this is like a land Ain book, land law book, which works only for West Bengal. So I've got these law books handy, so I can read about them and and have interesting moves to be made. So books all over. So I know this is a favorite shelf of mine, which is given by Shimul. I kind of keep the books which I can pull out very quickly and read it and put it back there. So Nick Lane, powerful, work on mitochondria and at cell biology level, The Vital Question, Power, Sex and Suicide, and Transformer, all three being a part of that. Again, reading with themes, that's I think my story about my libraries. I have given you a quick glimpse of things, but I must, books, they're all around the house, so I'm going to walk through and show you another section. So, I will keep stacking books everywhere. So, for those of you who were wondering whether I read any fiction, I do sparingly, but I've kept my fiction collection here, piled along with other things. So, remember that book I was talking about, like I had my Bengal phase because I was working with a friend of mine who was active in politics, and I was trying to kind of help her understand Bengal better. So I went into reading its history, crossing from the Bay of Bengal to understanding its culture, understanding history. These are like really old books of like Nitish Gupta and others, Niranjan Roy, old historians. So a lot of my Bengal chapter here, and all of this is the fiction, right? So you can see here. So this is my fiction collection, nothing to be so proud about, but I've got the collection of like Naipaul and Murakami, and this very interesting series on Alexander, which I've got here. If you turn around on the other side, so I would get into appreciating music, southern music, finding the raga, the NPR guide to how you listen to blues. So I find this, it might sound a little kiddish, but I would actually go in and have a structured understanding of jazz, like how to listen to jazz. So while I would enjoy jazz and I knew a lot of players, but I went through having like a walkthrough in timeline, going from the older days of jazz and coming to the modern era. I think there was a chronicle. Yeah, there was this book called The Chronicle of Jazz. So I would go through. I would turn on Spotify, I would go to a particular player, I'll read about them and then go to the next. So there was a, music learning, education phase, and a lot of mixture of books here, right, which I keep. A lot of these old state level politics, like a book like a Benji would come here to understand Benji. There'll be books in the same zone. Of course, an Atish Taseer, who's been very much victimized, and not the politically correct guy to talk about right now, but these are all good stuff. These are all good stuff. Some of these are a little old. A book of accountancy by my father, from my father, of William Pickle. I don't know what this book is doing here, and this I think goes into this old thing of pounds and older currencies and things like that. I think this is like from the 40s or 50s maybe, right? But I've held on to that. I've held on to some books of my father's time here, and I just keep them along with A Power of Habit of Charles Duhigg, or reading of Ambedkar. So this is where it kind of gets muddled, this whole collection here. And but I love to keep the books around. I would, on a given day, I'll keep some of the books right here, and like that day I just picked up this book from my father's collection, and I suddenly found a handwritten note saying, on the occasion of the marriage of my father's name was Saral and my mother's name was Bandana, a guy called Banobihari Das, and it was in 1959. Now this is one guy I remember very clearly coming every 2 or 3 months to our house to meet with my dad. He was an old, frail person, and he had done a lot of work, for the community of people that we belong to. And he was, running a cause, and my father would give him some subscription and all that. But that's it. I had vague memories. When I saw this book and I saw his name, the entire, memories came flooding back. I said, oh, and this is that Banobihari Das. He used to come and he would meet my dad. And now I suddenly realized that he gave this book called Bolaka. Now I would never associate him with a book of poetry, but I think in those days, in the marriage, there wasn't any ritual of giving, you would either give some flowers or you would give a book, and a book of poetry from Rabindranath was like classic. Also, here is the Shiv Puran, and the Shiv Puran, is there also in English. So my partner, she is reading it in Bengali while I'm reading it in English, and we are both like kind of prepping for Shivratri. So this is my good, bedside reading. Of course, the classics of the Jnana Jog, Karma Jog, Raj Jog, all in Bengali has to be there. And remember, we were talking about Sapolsky's, and so Sapolsky's Behave is right here. This is something that is currently of interest to me. And that's about it here. Let's just go and take a look at some of these real old ones. This is a room, which is the room built by my father. there was just this one room, and then my mother also lived here. A lot of old memories in the room. The desk where my grandfather used to work as a lawyer. This is a little couch that we used to have when I was a kid in our house in Kolkata. I've retrieved all of these things and brought them here. There's this little bed. This was the bed that my parents used after their marriage. Apparently, it comes in as a gift from the girl's house. So it's like this ceremonial bed which was there. The posts have been removed. So I kind of, a little bit of a dressing table, again from the time my parents got married. And their pictures are way up there. Everybody's kind of gone. Very, very interesting stories. As a young boy in the school, not even entering teens, just teens. Coffee, Tea or Me was a very, very saucy book. It's uninhibited memoirs of two airline stewardesses. So this is something that we would know, whether to go to page 35 or whether to go this, because that was the age when we were just being curious. Wacky, naughty, authentic, the smash national bestseller. That's how it says. Coffee, Tea or Me. So Coffee, Tea or Me, is something that me and my friend Joy would pour over and we would have to read. But, looking at these books now, I kind of get a sense of my father. So he was also reading, right? He was also curious about, what was happening. And, Paul Brunton, who is a guy who wrote a lot, he wrote this book called Letter from Arunachala, right? Which is the place where we went, the Arunachala, the sacred hill for Lord Shiva. So he wrote, Paul Brunton was heavily influenced by Indian spirituality, and he had also, but The Search of Secret Egypt is a book that I remember from my childhood. Books like, of course, there was a lot of P.G. Wodehouse, and this is one of them. But all these books were there in my father's library, small library. I remember those books, but now I've got them here. There has to be some interesting book sitting right here. Of course, City of Joy came out that time, and the whole trilogy by the Dominique Lapierre. So this is one of those books. The Soviet regime was, of course, very popular to read in the post-Nehru era, right? And then there are these old books which are so old and so tattered and moth-ridden and planted by insects that sometimes my mother would just tie them up with a rope because there was no other way to keep it. But I've just kept it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I can't, I can't throw them away. There are some I had to throw away because there wasn't anything readable, but these are books that I've seen ever since I was a kid. Jorashandra's Loho Kapat, these mystery books of Bhumkesh, which are sitting right here. Yeah, so a lot of these old books are here. This one had a very interesting story. Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, I think right after marriage, I think it was the first anniversary, and I was a terrible husband, and I would always forget about marriage and stuff like that. It was the first anniversary, and I'd kind of forgotten and to buy anything. So last minute I rushed out and I got a book like this, Sherlock Holmes. And my wife, I think if she ever gets to see this section of the video, she's my ex-wife, and she just cried, I think, the entire evening, saying that how can you give me a book of Sherlock Holmes on our wedding anniversary? So this was there by the time it was already bought. I talked about Mother there, the book of Mother, which was there, and of Aurobindo. So these are some of my father's books, the complete works of Sister Nivedita. So he was reading these books. So he was also interested in Indian spirituality, which I never got to know when he was alive. I mean, we never spoke about this or what is his interest and why is he interested in such stuff. But I can now look at these books. This book I must show. This is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Now, these are books that I got in my school as a prize. And I'm sure if I open it, yeah. So I was in class 5B, third in general proficiency. So I ranked third. Master S. Maiti, and this was St. Xavier's Collegiate School. 13th December 1972, right? That's it. So I was in grade 5, and very interesting, 20,000 Leagues. I'm sure everybody has read it, but I remember this book, and it has survived. It survived as my prize book. Of course, the Romarola I showed you there earlier, same Romarola, but this was my father's version. And I said that, after going through this, it was so fragile. I said, I must buy the new one. I got the Romarola new books of Life of Ramakrishna and also Vivekananda, but both of them were there with my father. So across generations, we are buying the same book, and that's what is most interesting. And I find with this books, because you kind of maintain a connection with your old family. And we are heading into the last bit here. I will turn on the lights. This is the bedroom that I was using when I had first moved into Chaudhachuli, the village. And of course, I had to first build out the bookshelves. I built out bookshelves here. A lot of these books have gone from here to there. This was the book Almira, which it belonged to my father, and I have preserved it. I've got it from Kolkata and I've got it into my village house in Turio. And this is exactly how I would do. Every day I would come in, or on a given summer day, open it up, and the books were stacked in 2 layers. Now it's just 1 layer because some of them have gone out. But all of these books have a history. So I have seen Guru Dakshina as a 6-year-old kid. I'm still seeing it. I think at some point my father loved travel, so he would buy these travel books. Let's travel in Spain, let's travel in Mexico. So in his imagination, he was traveling all over. He was also buying books of Gita, and now I'm also reading Gita. So, there's nothing really new happening here. I mean, it's the same thing. He was also buying fiction. He was collecting books of, Sharat Chandra. I'm also collecting books of Sharat Chandra. So, all of these books here, which were there with him. Of course, when I was at school, I would be reading the Enid Blyton's, the yellow storybook. So, you all go through the Enid Blyton phase. And I had given it, I'd got it as a gift. So, it says, To Boo Boo with Love. This is one of my favorite things now. Whenever I'll open a book, like right now, I had no clue, I had no memory of where this book is from, but open it, and this is one of my aunts, and she lives in America right now. She's very, very old, but she's still there. And she had given me this book, which says, so these books have these little things scribbled on the front, scribbled in the back, and every book has this little, stuff. Who is this? Born with the smile of the blue September skies, to you, my dear Shogato, I give my love deep in my heart, which lies yours ever, Anjan and Didi. Certainly not my book, right? Certainly not my book, because there was no one called Shogato. There's no Anjan or Didi that I know, but this book is there in my stuff. Great Expectations. I must have flicked it from someone. How we borrow books to read and it never goes back. Now, who the hell is Shogato? I don't know, but a book is there, is landed here, and it remains here. I don't know who is this from, but I'm sure I was getting these books from someone, or it could be that I also bought it secondhand. So, I don't know, but I think that's one of the fun things about these old books. I'm not going to bore you showing more of these. You kind of get the drift. Some of these books here have another interesting story. Some of them are my uncle's books, like. This one was, my father used to tell me that, Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Dale Carnegie's books were a hit that time, little known facts about well-known people. So it's there. And of course, there were these erotic things like, erotic Indian tales from the classic, and these were of terrible interest for me and joy, my friend. Maharaja, Maharani, the princess, these would kind of get into a little bit of an eroticism, and we would love to kind of get these books and go through them. Again, there is one more of the Sherlock Holmes. I think it's a poor cousin of the other one I showed you a few minutes back. So yeah, Roses in December was a book that my father loved, with MC Chagla. So they're all here. They're all going to be passed down to my next generation. I think there are some of them which is like a prize. I remember, Coral Island as a prize book. Let's see whether it is. No, it's not. So some of them, they don't have this label. But these well could be the books that I was reading. I was certainly reading this book, when I was in school. And then there are some which I picked up in college. So E.L. Doctorow became one of my favorite authors. And World's Fair is a classic of E.L. Doctorow, right? So this is something that I read in the college days. And again, Doctorow was introduced to me by Joy. You always have these influential friends, who will introduce your books. And So sad that I lost him very early in life. Here is this book. There's a lot of books written by Russian authors. This is like Pavel Bajov or something. Malagaita Jhapi. Now I remember this book, and if I remember it right, it was a gift. Yeah, it says Shondip ke Janmodine Gitanjali Mashi. So I used to learn Rabindra Sangeet from this lady called Gitanjali Khetri. She was a Punjabi living in Kolkata, teaching me and many others, Rabindra Sangeet, Tagore songs. And this was a book that he gave to me on my birthday, right? So I think this was when I was 20 years old, and so these were very popular, Russian books translated in Bengali. So, that Russia had a huge impact in terms of books, and we would also buy these because they were very economical books. Another book, a lot of memory. This one, my father used to make me read it, A Treasury of the World's Great Speeches. So he would make me read it and also elocute the speeches out, and that would give us a great perspective into the people who had written the speeches. I don't know whether such books are read by people nowadays and where they have gone, but these are like very strong memories for me, right, in here. And that's kind of brings us to the end of this tour. I think I've taken you all from my days in the US to books that I'm buying now, and I'm still buying books. I buy on average 3 to 4 books every week. I'm trying to get out of this. I've read that it's a kind of an addiction, but I would love to have this addiction. I can call it a hobby and pass it off. But this whole business of browsing through books, looking at these old ones, bringing back those memories, I think it's a fascinating world. It's a world which only I inhabit, and today for the first time I've just shared it with people. I just hope that this reaches people who also love books like me, and someday there are people who would love to share their treasures or maybe document it, because these things get lost, and books bring down all these things. It's not a story-less, just a book environment, which is a library, right? There are libraries which have got millions of books, but I think in these personal libraries, you get a lot of stories of life. They tend to linger. There is a smell. There's that old book you picked up from a friend. There's this book that, your uncle had borrowed and had given you. And you have memories around these books. You have seen them so many times, and now you keep them and you see it later. What if, my son or daughter or their children one day still get the same books, and they can cross-check with this little story that I talked about the books, and they can still continue on. They will know why I was buying these books, and maybe they will continue to buy, or maybe the world would have changed by then and they're not reading books anymore and they're reading the digital versions. I really hope that people continue to make books in the way they're doing, even if it's in limited supplies. But, all those who love books, this is for you out there. Don't feel shy to say that you love books, and keep buying books and keep reading them. And even if you can't read them, keep buying them and collecting them, right? That's it for now from Studio.